Isabel Wilkerson, your title strikes me, The Warmth of Other Suns. It's from Richard Wright about the decision of African Americans, an African American man, to leave the South, seek a better life elsewhere. Just talk about that choice in itself.
The choice of leaving.
The title.
The title. Whoa. The title. The title comes from Richard Wright, one of the great novelists of the 20th century, who experienced what the people in the book experienced, what the 6 million African Americans who poured out of the South and went to all points north, Midwest, and West, and he had lived through that. And he left Mississippi for Chicago in 1927, and he wrote about the heartache of making the decision to leave all that he knew and all the people he loved to go to some place he'd never seen. And he described the idea of leaving the South, of leaving all that he had known for this place far, far away, for what he hoped would be the warmth of other suns. I thought that it was a perfect way to describe what they wanted.
When I first knew you would be with us, and as a reporter and interviewer, you start thinking about the question. So often with authors, you want to know, where did this come from? What led you to this monumental? And this was an enormous labor of love and pain, I'm sure, at times. Then I opened the book, and I saw the dedication to your own parents, and quoting here, and you said, and the millions of others like them who dared to act upon their dreams. This was personal for you. I mean, this was, in a broad sense, and kind of particular, your family story.
Yes, so it is my family's story. Although, interestingly enough, my parents never spoke about it. And one of the things that ties this migration to even other migrations that have occurred in the 20th century is that people of that generation generally did not talk about what they'd endured. They'd experienced tremendous hardship, tremendous, actually, terror, the horrors of living under this caste system that controlled their lives. And yet once they got out, they didn't talk about what they'd endured. And my parents had come from the South and they migrated to Washington, D.C., the first stop on the routes north for the parts of the South that they were from. And they never spoke about it. So in some ways, the story, the book, came from the desire of a daughter to want to understand how she came to be, how my parents met, how they made the decision to leave, what propelled them to leave, and how I came to be, and how so many people like myself came to be, because they weren't really talking about it when I grew up.
You and your parents, and this fascinated me, literally retrace the path of one of you. You focus on three people who left different parts of the South for different parts of North or West. Robert Joseph Pershing Foster, an educated man, a physician. 1953, he leaves Louisiana for the West Coast, and he drove at one point, I think it was across 3 states of the South, because he didn't know where it would be safe for a black man to stop, get a meal, get some rest, be safe doing that. What an amazing story there, and to retrace that then.
Yes, he had made this journey from the Jim Crow South. He had actually been a surgeon in the Army, where he could practice surgery for the United States Army, but was not permitted to practice surgery in his own hometown of Monroe, Louisiana. So he set off on this perilous journey. He hadn't realized how perilous it would be, and he comes across the what he feels are the outer edges of Jim Crow. He felt he was safe once he got to certain states of the West, Arizona, New Mexico. And it turned out he had a difficult time finding a place to stay for the night, to rest for the night, and the hotels would not permit him a room. And we retraced that journey. My mother and my father were in the car with me as I was driving in the same way he had, in the total darkness on those hairpin curves, and not being able to see around these sharp corners along the edge of these mountains. And we weren't able to stop. We could have stopped because time was different, but I was so determined to recreate this that I was doing what he had done. And at a certain point, my parents were quite nervous for us because I was veering from the road, falling asleep at the wheel as he had been, and they said, "You must stop the car. And if you won't stop the car, just let us out, because we've lived through this. We'll tell you about what it was like, but this is not safe." And so we stopped in Yuma, Arizona, where, because times had changed, we had no trouble finding a place. But they were there with me in the car.
And yet, in the Great Migration, as these colored people, as they were called then, go west or north to the places that had sent the Yankee soldiers south to liberate, to change things, do they have the illusion that they're going to a better place? And I guess it's better than Jim Crow, but yet when they got there, they often, very often, more often than not, were not welcomed by the whites, and they weren't often welcomed by the established African Americans already in places.
You're absolutely right. In some ways, what they experienced are what almost immigrants experience whenever they come to a new place, where they are viewed with suspicion and resentment because of the changes that they might bring to the economy, worrying about whether it will drive down the wages because they're different, because they bring a different culture or perceived to be bringing a different culture. And they had to face those same headwinds when they arrived in the North.
Backtracking a little bit, but something I wanted to mention, a story that absolutely, I literally brought tears to my eyes. You talk about a black surgeon who cannot treat black people in the South in white hospitals, and tell the story of what he did, how he practiced and tried to help people.
Yes, I mean, for in that era where everything was segregated, I mean, it was actually against the law for a black person and a white person to play checkers together in Birmingham. So that's how extreme and arcane the world was. But it also was against protocol and not allowed for African American physicians to have privileges, admitting privileges in the hospital. So whatever they did, they needed to do in the cabins and the homes of the sharecroppers that they were attending to. And so they had to make do with whatever they'd had. He had actually been a surgeon in the Army, as I indicated, where he'd had access to all of the modern amenities that a physician would expect to have. And there he was in these sharecropper cabins trying to make do with whatever he had. And his brother, who was also a physician, had to carry essentially the entire needs of an operating room in his trunk. I mean, he had this makeshift gurney that he had for himself. I mean, all these things that they had to create. And they were often not being paid for whatever they did because they were working with sharecroppers who didn't have the money. These were really bleak times, and they went on for far longer than people are aware of. I mean, the world that they were living in lasted into the 1960s and didn't end until the Civil Rights era and the legislation.
As you look back on the Great Migration that changed this country in so many ways, socially, politically, culturally, and the amazing amount of time you've spent, 2 decades really of your life, to produce this amazing book, can you look ahead and see a true melting pot where we really are all one and equal and respectful of all cultures and races? Did you see something good coming through the years that you've covered and looked at this?
Well, one of the things that happened as a result of this migration is that people who in this country had really not had the opportunity to even so much as choose where they would live and what they would do for a living. This was the first time that in large numbers African Americans could do that. So that opened up doors to all kinds of people who would become playwrights, people who would become novelists. We spoke of Richard Wright in the beginning. People who would become musicians and physicians and engineers, all kinds of things that they could not have done in the Jim Crow South as it existed. And so they opened up a way for so many people who may not make the connections, for women and for people who come from other countries. Immigration laws opened up as a result of this. Rights and laws that protect the disabled. I mean, all of these things bubbled forth after this great outpouring of people from the South, African Americans, who put so much pressure on the country merely by the decisions that they'd made to leave, that the entire region that they'd had to flee changed, and it put pressure on the rest of the country as well to really take a close look at what the country stands for. And I think that's a hopeful thing. The fact that these individuals, one person added to another, could actually change the region that they were from and actually open up a way for the country to look at itself gives me hope.
Well, Isabel Wilkerson, author of The Warmth of Other Suns, The Epic Story of America's Great Migration. It's an awesome book. Thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks so much for having me.